Hello, friends. I hope you're staying well and maintaining your sanity. Thank you for letting me provide what may be a well-needed escape for you as I travel on the wine road. And this time, I take a detour, a huge detour, as I take to the skies.
We've made our commitment is to Pinot Noir. I mean, that's what Oregon's all about. And that's really where my passion is. It's challenging from a winemaking standpoint, and I like taking those challenges on.
Here in the Willamette Valley, more people are coming to try our wines and share our wines from all around the world. And so we view all of those people as our family and friends. That's also what we call our wine club members.
When I decided to come back and take over the reins, have them be passed to me, I felt I needed a little more education than just my father. And so I decided to do a postgraduate degree in Burgundy.
Back in December, my wife and I took a flight north to Portland, then traveled through Willamette Valley to share the stories of two famed wineries and one who is up and coming. You'll meet one of the first female winemakers hired to work in Oregon, Lynn Penner-Ash. I'll chat with a small winery who made a life change after a tragic accident. They tossed the ball away, found a farm in Newburgh, planted vines, and are now making waves with their Chardonnay and Noir. What's that? Find out later from Hazelfern Cellars. Then we'll travel to Ponzi Vineyards, where you'll hear from winemaker Luisa Ponzi. While her father and mother weren't the first to plant Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in Willamette Valley, they were quick to follow two Oregon winemaking pioneers. I've been anxious to post these interviews for some time now, but topics that were more timely in nature were posted more recently. Hearing these interviews again weighs heavy on my heart, knowing they are struggling and forced to be creative like wineries across the country trying to sell wine during these frustrating times. Willamette Valley is huge, 150 miles in length. Wineries are found up and down the valley, but a majority of the ones you're likely familiar with are north of Salem. The wineries in this podcast are in the Newburgh area, in the northern end of the valley. I'll start with the dynamic Lynn Penner-Ash. After a successful career, which included time in Napa Valley, she and her husband founded Penner-Ash. We were looking forward to visiting the winery because we thought we were there in 2007 on a similar trip, and we remembered the stunning view. But the week we were there, they had the same weather we had here in Northern California, another one of those atmospheric rivers, so the winery was fogged in. However, we had a comfortable spot in their tasting room by a welcoming fire. Lynn shared details of the view we were missing.
It's still really beautiful. I think this is part of Oregon's really unique aspects here. We are sitting up here in the fog, but what's really exciting about this area that we're located in is we can actually see the Chehalem Mountain Ridge off to the left. And if you look straight out of our tasting room here, you can actually see Mount Hood. And then off to your right here, we can see the Cascade Range along with the Dundee Hills. And what I love to point out to people when they come to visit us is that standing right out here on our tasting room and in the deck in the area out here, you can actually see 7 different AVAs in Oregon. We have that many different aspects that you can point out to our customers when they come by.
I can almost picture it. After 6 years of interviewing winemakers, I am still intrigued by the many avenues all you take to where you get. If there was a map of directions from the places that winemakers come from, it would be like a road map with just thousands of entry points.
It is, yeah. Mine is a very unique start. I actually came from the East Coast. I was working for the Smithsonian Institute, and I wanted to be a botanist. And so they sent me to UC Davis to be a botanist. Oh. And that's how my path started.
That's how you got there. Yeah, I saw you had a passion for botany.
Still do, yeah.
And it's not a big jump, because when you were at UC Davis, you switched to viticulture, and that's not a huge leap.
It wasn't a huge leap. I think that the side of the winemaking was much of a big transition a lot of people didn't expect, from my love of plants to then all of a sudden making wine as my kind of first and go-to aspects of my job.
I could see why you liked that, but I was picturing you, because you did a harvest at Domaine Chandon, right? So I thought, she's seeing these guys and doing this back-breaking work in viticulture, and you saw the winemaker off to the side tasting some grapes and the juice and thought, that's what I want to do.
Actually, unfortunately, it was more about being at UC Davis and being told by a professor that women didn't belong in the vineyards that sent me on my path in a different direction.
Really?
Yeah. I thought, I'm going to show him, and I actually decided to go back to Davis and get my degree in winemaking. So I finished the viticulture degree, spent a year working at Chateau St. Jean, and decided to go back and finish up as in the enology department instead, figuring that was the back door into viticulture. Well, in the end, I got the best of both worlds. I own a vineyard and a winery.
Yeah. Yes, that's worked out pretty well for you. What year was that?
It would have been 1984.
Okay. Because there still weren't that many female winemakers at that time.
No, there weren't. And it was interesting with the graduating class, how many women were actually in my graduating class and how many actually ended up being in the wine industry. It was a very small number.
Any names that we would be familiar with?
Pam Starr, Lorna, I can't remember her last name now. She was at BV. Francois Pechon came after me a couple of years after. We worked together at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars.
Oh. So yeah, your dive into enology worked out pretty well because you had the opportunity to work at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, as you mentioned, Domaine Chandon and Chateau Saint Jean, all very respectable places with incredible winemakers at the time.
That's correct. Yeah. And then I got my big opportunity when I was down at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. I was actually looking for a job to make the leap from enologist to, say, assistant winemaker or winemaker, and was struggling trying to find something that would really work well for me when I was actually offered a job by Paul Hart at Rex Hill up in Oregon as the winemaker. So I skipped directly from enologist straight to winemaker and moved up to Oregon.
So that's what brought you up here. I saw that you had an interest in this because it was a burgeoning region, it was growing, and you and your husband both had interest in coming up here.
We did. Actually, my husband really encouraged me more so. I was a little hesitant because there was that whole belief that if you didn't make wine in Napa, you wouldn't really amount to much of anything. This was not a well-known region. Yeah. When I started, there were 49 wineries in the state of Oregon, and now there's 750-some wineries in the state of Oregon. So I've been a part of some phenomenal growth here in Oregon.
What was your husband Ron doing at that time?
He was teaching, so we had a great transition here. When I got the offer to come to Oregon as the winemaker at Rex Hill, he easily transitioned into a teaching position here in Oregon.
So from 1988 to 93, you rose to the level of president and COO in a fairly short amount of time. So, man, you were on a path.
I was on a path. It was a wild ride, believe me. Coming to a new wine region, very unknown. Didn't have a lot of resources, too. That was a big challenge that I found coming from Napa up to here to Oregon. There was not a lot of resources available for just general supplies, anybody that could, maybe technicians that could come in and help with the bottling lines. And so we had a lot of bootstrapping going on.
And I also found it interesting that while you were working at Rex Hill, you and Ron started Penner-Ash Wine Cellars on the side. And again, you were quite determined, weren't you?
We were. And it took a lot of effort. I mean, we had 2 young children at the time. We had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and we were starting this brand. Cashed in our retirements, and then Ron would come home from school and then drive wine into Portland to get it delivered and have to sit and wait for the checks to be delivered. And he'd come home, and I'd made dinner, get the kids put to bed, and that was our day. It was just like nonstop.
Did you anticipate getting to this level at some point?
I don't think we ever imagined getting to this level, yeah. For us, it was going to be just like a little fun on the side project, and we realized as it grew, it was just growing so fast, and there was a lot of excitement around it that we decided if we were ever going to do it, we should take this opportunity and just do it. And so here we are.
So in 2002, you finally left Rex Hill and focused on Penner-Ash Wine Cellars. And do you think it was your winemaking philosophy at the time, or the sudden popularity in Pinot Noir that led to your success, or maybe a perfect storm of both?
I think it's a perfect storm of both, and we always listen to how I built this a lot of times, and Guy Raz asked the question, And for me, I think that there's a lot of luck involved. I mean, we were there here in Oregon at the right time, and we took the risk and came to Oregon when it was unknown. And so right there, being in the right place at the right time, but we took that chance and did this. And then the fact that Pinot Noir, I think I have a natural ability to understand what a lot of the vineyards and how they want to be made and what speaks to those vineyard sites, which really created a style for Penner-Ash that was very successful and very well received. And so we had a lot of luck, but we also had a lot of skill in what we were doing. And the whole determination and passion and commitment too. I mean, there was a lot of that went into this project.
Yeah, passion is a big word that I hear frequently when I do my interviews, so I'm sure you did. And luck is another word, too, I hear. It's just being at the right place at the right time. The benefit, though, of being an owner and a successful winemaker is when the time is right, you get to design a winery based on your desired specifications.
Yeah, and I actually had, ironically enough, I had a list of things that worked at wineries that I had worked for and things that did not work. Oh, great. And so when we started this project, that was the first thing I did was pull out my list and go, okay, we have the opportunity to do it right now. I've been complaining about all these other projects that I've worked for. Now it's our turn to try.
So you kind of had that gravity flow idea in mind at that time, and maybe even, and did Ron help design this, did I see?
He's part of it, yeah. Well, the gravity flow idea is something that we all dream of, but not a lot of opportunity presents in a lot of regions here. And this hillside spoke to us that gravity flow was going to be ideal. And so that's when I sat down and started drawing out the whole plans of how this production side of the winery would work. And I did it on graph paper because we didn't have the luxury of AutoCAD and all these fancy systems. And so I sat down with a piece of graph paper and actually literally cut out circles where tanks were going to go and practiced driving these little fake paper forklifts around to see how the flow would work, because I really wanted to make it an ergonomically sustainable facility that you could work in and not hurt yourself in.
That's great. Old school winery planning. Well, it worked. It's an attractive, well-designed, functional production facility and hospitality space. It's also surrounded by vineyards. I asked if the vineyards were planted prior to the winery or did the building come first?
No, we actually had to plant the vineyards first. And so we started our planning in 2002 and then continued the design build process. And that's when we opened in 2005 was when the building was complete.
But you had the footprint laid out. You knew where you were going to put the building and planted the vineyards on the hillsides around it.
Yeah, it took us a while to figure out where the winery needed to be located because we really wanted to have the feeling, we call it a sense of place. When you arrive, you feel like you've arrived in the sense of place. And we were playing around with different ideas of where the winery should be. And we'd go and we'd stand there, and we'd come back in the afternoon and stand there. We'd sit out there with glasses of wine. And ultimately, we gravitated towards the space where the winery's located. And then that dictated the design of the building.
You know, one of the reasons I wanted to come up to Oregon was to develop an interest in Viognier and Riesling. And this will be a good place to start, I imagine.
Yes, because we have both of those. I think we're one of the few wineries that actually makes Viognier, and Riesling is such a rare commodity around here that we're very proud of our dry Riesling.
It's not that we don't have it at our disposal in Sonoma and Napa counties, but there's so many other wonderful wines that I gravitate to as far as the whites and the reds. And both my wife and I just haven't quite gone down that path yet, so I'm looking forward to maybe developing a flavor for it.
Well, I think the other thing is interesting. As you try the wines, you'll notice that because we have much cooler growing seasons here, we get some nice warmth in the days, but then our nights are very much cooler, that a lot of those aromatic whites tend to develop really nice fruit and forward flavors, but still retain their acidity. So there's a brightness or a freshness to those that make them great food wines.
They bottle a Syrah as well, but as a former UC Davis and Napa Sonoma Valley resident, I asked if she had interest in producing other varieties, or is Pinot Noir not just the obvious choice, but a personal selection?
Oh, I think we've made our commitment is to Pinot Noir. I mean, that's what Oregon's all about. And one of the things that we've really enjoyed doing is sourcing Pinot Noir from various AVAs throughout Oregon. So we represent very different types of wine, but all from Pinot Noir. And that's really where my passion is. It's challenging to make, especially with the difference in the weather patterns that we get coming through. Some years it's very warm, other years it's very cool. It's very challenging from a winemaking standpoint, and I like taking those challenges on.
Yeah, I imagine there's some years where certain varieties just don't grow well enough, and you can't make the wine, but they keep it on their portfolio, and some years they can make it, some years they can't.
Well, for us, I mean, it's not so much for different varieties, because we've chosen, I think, wisely as far as varieties go. We're sourcing our Syrah from Southern Oregon, so that it's pretty consistent down there. We get our Viognier from Southern Oregon, again, it's pretty consistent down there. And for me, we make a dry Riesling, and it's grown here, and it seems like no matter what the weather throws at us, we're able to make a really lovely dry Riesling. So we're really more challenged, I think, with the weather patterns with the Pinot Noir itself. We have started a Chardonnay program, so I say it's just Pinot Noir, but now I might say that also challenged by the Chardonnay with the different weather patterns we have. I mean, we've harvested as early as like the end of August to starting to harvest sometime more like the first part of October. And so you can have a 4 to 5 week swing some years based on what weather patterns we've seen in Oregon.
Yeah, I imagine if it can grow in Germany, a certain variety, then you could probably grow it here. However, I've seen like Tempranillo and some Italian varieties being grown here.
Yeah, and I think that there's also some people growing Viognier and Syrah here in the North Willamette Valley, which if you had talked to me 30 years ago when I first started my career, I'd say they were absolutely insane to even consider that. There was Cabernet being grown in the North Willamette Valley, and I actually got that fruit because I was from the Napa Valley and I was going to show these guys how to make Cab. Yeah. I took that fruit for 10 years and I only bottled 2 vintages.
Wow. Mentioning the Cab, and now some people are getting away with that, or other varieties that are warmer climate varieties. Are you seeing global warming affecting things? Do you think that's what it is, or just...
There's definitely something going on. It's so hard to have this conversation with people, but I have been here for now going on 30 plus years, and the thing that I have seen is if you take a comparative analysis of, say, all the different degree days that we've had over our growing seasons, the last 10 years have been 1 to 2 degrees warmer than any other 50 plus years of growing in Oregon.
That's pretty substantial.
Yeah, it adds up.
Yeah. Are you using primarily the Pommard clone, and what other clones are you using for your Pinot?
That's a good question. There was a whole movement back in '85 or so when the Dijon clones were approved to come into the United States, and that was actually brought into the U.S. by David Adelsheim and Oregon State University. So they worked together to bring in those Dijon clones that everybody's now planting. And I think a lot of people in Oregon started planting those because it did bring maturity up by 7 to 10 days using Dijon clones along with rootstock. And so a lot of people went out and really went in and put it in a big way because they were excited by this. I've always been a big fan of Pommard. It's slower to mature, but it seems to be a really great workhorse for mouthfeel and consistency in our wines, and so we like having it in our portfolio.
What came as a surprise to many after building their successful brand for nearly 20 years, Lynn and her husband Ron sold Penner Ash to Sonoma-based Jackson Family Wines in 2016. I asked her if she felt comfortable touching upon that subject.
Well, it's a decision we made, and it was a difficult decision, but I think it's a decision we both really now understand and are enjoying the benefits of that said decision. We're both getting to the point where we like to travel and have a little more freedom. For me, this is my 40th vintage. We put 20 plus years into this project here, and it's been nonstop keeping this project going forward and being on the top of the echelon as far as Pinot producers go. And so we both kind of looked at each other, and it was an opportunity to see that the legacy continued, but also gave us the ability to do what we wanted to do in kind of the next chapter.
Yeah, I like when you see a group like Jackson Family purchase a winery, but they keep a lot of the principals on staff, and you may not be a staff member, but you certainly are the face of the winery still to this day. And well, you were here in a meeting just a minute ago before we started talking.
Yeah, and the other really nice aspect was that I got to hire kind of I call her my mini-me, and I've really enjoyed working with her the last 4 years, and she's doing a fantastic job. That's Kate Ayers, who's now the winemaker here, and so I get to come in and have all the fun. I get to sit down and taste wines with her, talk about kind of what we're doing, look for vineyard sites, go out into the vineyards, but, the day-to-day winemaking, Kate gets to take care of it.
Yeah, it must be a big load off, huh?
Oh, it's huge.
But is it tonight you're still driving to Portland to do a winemaker dinner?
I am, yeah. I still go in town and travel, do some traveling. I am the face of the winery, and so I do get out quite a bit and continue telling the story of Penner Ash.
Yeah, that's great that you get to represent it, and you know it so well. But it is, nice to have time to travel and enjoy the life that you built.
Exactly. So it's been fun.
How about your children? Did they follow your steps into the wine industry?
No, they're both very independently pursuing their own lives. Our son is a geologist up in Seattle, and our daughter is an artist down in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh, well, respectable careers, no doubt. Usually there is more than one child. One of them ends up working in the winery at some point and may stay in the industry, but yours just went off in different paths.
Yeah, I always thought our son, because he has a great palate and he loves to cook, so I thought he would be more interested in the wine side of things. But, the other thing that I look at is I think our children saw how hard we worked and how much time and energy it took to create this business. And I think that might have been part of the reason why they both kind of went off in their own directions.
And they may not have had the passion like you did.
Well, right, and it's our passion. And then you think about the ability to succeed like your parents did and to follow in those footsteps. I think they both want to try to do their own thing.
Well, Lynn, congratulations on what has become a remarkable, inspiring, and even enviable career.
Well, thank you. It's been a good career.
The respectable Lynn Penner Ash, who has a little more time in her hands now. That, too, is enviable. Of course, I said that on my radio show back a few months ago, before we all had plenty of time on our hands. As I mentioned earlier, you can find the Penner Ash label at most stores and pennerash.com. It's spelled like it sounds. I was grateful that she took time out of her still occasionally busy workday to share some time with us that morning. Now we'll get back on the road and head over to Hazelfern Cellars, high in the hills overlooking Newburgh. I'm glad I was alerted to the winery and home of Bryan and Laura Laing because they were so fun to hang with, and they offered an entirely different experience than Penner Ash. When they describe their relaxed place, you'll understand. And if you want to get a good feel for them, visit their website, hazelfern.com. Your website is pretty descriptive about what you're doing here, and right at the very top you have passion in Pinot, courage, and Chardonnay. And from what I've learned, Chardonnay's, until fairly recently, has been a challenge up here, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's become our favorite to make, though, and only recently has it become a really big deal here in the Willamette Valley. There's a huge focus on producing world-class, just incredible quality, and we've fallen in love with Chardonnay from all around the world, but specifically here in Oregon, and are just super excited to be making it.
Laura, also on your website it says, we make wines for family and friends. You're really supposed to reach out to other people and try to sell them too,
That's true. But this all started because we have loved sharing wine with family and friends. And so, but yeah, we just think it's like a condiment on the table. It's something that brings people together. And so it's kind of just part of who we are.
Well, from what I've learned from talking to many winemakers, when they first start, the consumer is, the family, the friends.
Yeah, that's right. And like Laura said, it's just, we're super excited to be here in the Willamette Valley right now because of the world-class or the worldwide attention that's here on this wine-growing region. And so we view wine as something that brings people together from around the world. We've always talked about being excited to raise our two girls, so they're 8 and 6 years old, but raise them here in the Willamette Valley in a space where more people are coming to try our wines and share our wines from all around the world. And so we view all of those people as our family and friends. That's also what we call our wine club members. So it's we actually don't love the term wine club. We try not to use that. It's you're a part of our family. When you're coming into Hazelfern.
Well, it's certainly better out here than that dingy Portland basement where you started, huh?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've come a long way. Yeah, we started in 2006. Laura and I making wine out of our basement in Northeast Portland. That's where our name comes from. So Hazelfern, all of Northeast used to be a big cattle farm back in the 1800s called Hazelfern Farm, and so we started making our wine there. Literally started out with just 5 gallons of Pinot Noir, and have just continued to double every year since. And in 2014, we like to say we had a quarter-life crisis that brought us here to Newburgh, where we make our wines now in this horse barn that we're sitting in. So,
I don't mean to touch on something that's emotional, but do you want to share what happened back in was it 2014?
2014,
in 2014?
Yeah. So we have a cousin, and she was following her dream. She actually had finished beating cancer. She had moved to Hawaii. She was 27 years old, and she was following her passion of working for an organic farm. And she was setting up a tent at a farmer's market, just as you would see anywhere. And a truck sadly skipped the curb, and she passed away. So that was March of 2014, and it for us was just the trigger of what was our why and what we were living for. And so 2 months later, we sold our life in Portland and purchased the property down here, and decided this is how we wanted to spend our days.
What a tragic event nonetheless, but having beat cancer and you have your whole life ahead of you, then to have it cut short like that is just horrific.
Yeah, definitely had a great impact on our lives. And, obviously we would love to have Annie back with us. Silver lining is I share her story every single day, and I hope that it sort of inspires other people to live for today, because there's no certainty of what tomorrow will bring.
Well, that's why I don't mind tasting wine at 10 a.m. in the morning, because it's like, enjoy the day. Let's try to. You had the extreme luck of finding this historic wine barn that you're in now, and what a great property.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in Newburgh. We're kind of on the Portland side of Newburgh, just as you come from Portland into the Willamette Valley. And when we walked into this barn, we absolutely fell in love with the property. So we knew that this area, there's a couple historic vineyards up here on the hill, and so we knew this area was good for grape growing. But it wasn't until we really walked into this barn that we just had a vision for what could become here. And so there was an old barn here right where we sit, and it goes with the farmhouse that's on the property that was built in 1915, so one of the original properties here in the Newburgh area. And the owners before us actually set out to redo that barn, and by the time they got done with it, there's only a couple, studs and posts that remain from the original. So they've totally redone this space. They did an amazing job. They spent 3 years building this Kentucky-inspired horse barn. Again, horses were their absolute passion, so they were following their dream in building this. Handcrafted every single detail. It's a beautiful, beautiful space that we can't take credit for. But right when they finished building it, they got relocated to Virginia for work, and so the barn actually never had an animal inside of it. And so it's only been used for winemaking and wine tasting, but we feel super fortunate that we just happened to walk in on the right day. And again, I think things just kind of lined up. Like, we got super lucky to be here in this unique space. We feel like it's something really, really different in the valley, and that's why we love it.
Yeah, their unfortunate luck turned out to be pretty good for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, super lucky for us.
Yes, good luck was on their side, if not guidance from a lost cousin. I've mentioned their expressive website a couple of times already, and at this point in the interview, I referred to their comment of honing their wines through hustle, hard work, and drinking with friends. So I asked the question, which of you two hustled more than the other?
Definitely me. Maybe Bryan. Equal. We'll go equal. Yeah. A lot of hustle, a lot of hard work. Definitely equal in the drinking.
What are your defined roles? I'm sure there's a lot of gray area there, but...
A lot of gray area. Bryan really leads winemaking. I lead sort of hospitality. Bryan leads vineyards. I co-make the wines with Bryan. Like I said, but it is a lot of gray area. We kind of wear every hat.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about building this through hustle and hard work just because we started in our basement with 5 gallons and have literally just built this thing, one carboy at a time every single year. We come in a little bit differently in the fact that we like to think of ourselves as young. Maybe we're not that young anymore, but we just through that grind every single day and just working hard. We love to work. Laura and I actually met working for a retail marketing agency. And so we had corporate jobs before we ended up here, before that accident happened in 2014. And so we met and fell in love working together and traveling the world for projects and executing in great cities like New York City, enjoying great wine in those cities. And, so because we fell in love working together, we have loved building this project together. And it's just, it's a lot of hard work. We work very, very late nights, but again, we do really love it. We wear all the hats. And that's what we love about it is you get to do everything. It's not going to work every day and just doing one thing every single day. We get to do whatever the day throws at us every single day. Right. So it's been a lot of fun and a lot of hard work.
So you guys were traveling together as corporate peers and you fell in love, so you continued traveling together, and that worked out pretty well, didn't it?
It did. I said that we had the best dating life because we had an expense account.
Right. Nice. So I was just talking with Luisa Ponzi, and she actually called you a genius, and I'm sure with winemaking, but also in marketing.
Yeah, that's our background. First of all, it's very kind of her to say. She's someone that we really look up to here in the Willamette Valley, but also here in the Chehalis Mountains, and her family, being one of those founding members here. So that's very flattering that she would say that. From a marketing standpoint, Laura and I, as I said, we met working for a retail marketing agency, and we really come from the footwear business. So our common account that was here in the Portland area is Nike. And then also got to work for several other footwear brands. And that has really translated well for us into wine. I know people always kind of laugh when I say this at first, but wine and the footwear business is really very, very similar. So we really love, of course, making wine, and we really geek out on, every detail of the wine, all the clones that go into it, how we make all the decisions for growing that wine. But when it comes down to the average consumer who's just enjoying a bottle of wine, when they go to the grocery store, there's, an infinite number of SKUs on the shelf for them to choose from. And so it's the job of the winery to really help tell that story and bring, more than just what's in the bottle to life. And that's the same with shoes. So if you think about going to a Foot Locker or Dick's Sporting Goods, there's a whole shoe wall in there, and how you make that decision as far as which shoe you actually want. Like, certainly there's a designer that's really geeked out on every single lace, every single detail, just like we are about the wine. But as far as the storytelling that goes with it and the marketing, it's a really similar business.
I think with your age, you're reaching out to buy your website, and the way I've seen it is you're hitting that millennial market, really tapping into their lifestyle, and I'm sure that you're bringing them along with you.
Yeah, certainly technically I think we are millennials, but they're part of our friends, they're part of our family, they're part of kind of our journey here in the winery, and something that I think, wine should be for everybody. And I think that's first and foremost how we look at it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of wineries talk about reaching the millennials, but your site has certainly appealed to me, and I'm way beyond that. So I really enjoyed it. So good job there. Tell me about your winemaking style. I noticed you're using some larger barrels here.
Yeah, so the barrels that you're referencing are for Chardonnay. So those are punch ends that just help retain a lot of the freshness that's in the fruit of that wine. Overall winemaking style, we like to say that we are new school kids making old school wines, and so we are very inspired by the old world winemaking methods. We use a minimal approach with very, very cool ferment temperatures. We're looking for very delicate extraction, trying to make very elegant wines that are acid driven, amazing with food. Food and wine is everything to us. We love to cook, just like we love to make wine, and so we want our wines to have great natural acidity. That's like the salt that goes on the food when you're doing a nice food and wine pairing. And so, again, complexity, elegance, texture is very important, and acid driven old school wines.
And some rare varieties, too. You're doing Gamay, and these noirs that you're making are a little unusual for this area, right?
Yeah, that's right. So when we moved here in 2014 and planted our vineyard, we knew that we wanted to plant Pinot Noir. So, of course, we have that. That's obviously a great area for that. But in addition, we wanted to do some different stuff. So we did Gamay Noir. That is becoming a very popular variety here in the valley. You're seeing a lot of that planted. There's a whole festival that happens every year in May down in Portland, just dedicated to the Gamay grape. And so that's becoming a much bigger deal. And then we planted something much more obscure called Trousseau Noir from the Jura region of France. So a little region, about 45-minute drive just east of Burgundy, where they grow Trousseau, Poulsard, also do a little bit of Pinot Noir there. And so we were inspired by that region, but also inspired by the Irie Vineyards, which is the original vineyard planted here in the Dundee Hills. And so Jason, who is the owner and winemaker of that vineyard, had planted it a couple years before we got to this point where we had to make a decision to plant here. And so we knew that we liked that grape just as something that we were drinking out of the Jura. And then we figured if Jason's planting it here in the valley, that guy knows what he's doing. And so we wanted to do something different, and we planted it as well. So we have those three varieties. Right. We got our very first harvest in 2018. We picked the entire site together and just co-fermented one statement from the property that's called Noir. And so, again, it's Pinot Noir, Gamay Noir, and Trousseau Noir all together as one.
I really enjoyed the Hazelfern Noir. Even picked up a couple of bottles. But Chardonnay is their love.
Yeah, so 100% barrel fermented and barrel aged, but here in the Willamette Valley, a much cooler climate than the friends down south, and so we just end up with a different acid profile, and so the way that acid interacts with the barrel is very different. So I would say that most people that come in here are familiar with California Chardonnay. I mean, that's a massive, obviously one of the largest, wine SKUs in the world is Chardonnay from California. And so that's what most people are familiar with. Oregon Chardonnay is very, very different than that. And again, it's because we're a cooler climate. And so we have just a totally different acid profile. You tend to end up with a fruit profile that's more lemony all the way up to kind of like apples or pears. We don't see as much as the tropical fruit. We just don't, the fruit here doesn't ripen in that same way that it does in a warmer climate. So the Chardonnays here are much, more closely resemble the Chardonnays like a white Burgundy. So, same as Burgundy grows Pinot, they have amazing Chardonnay as well.
So if you're one of those people who is ABC, you know that term? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything but Chardonnay. Yeah. You're offering them something that they would enjoy. It's not oaky or buttery.
Yeah, and those are my favorite people to pour Chardonnay for from Oregon. And it's without fail, we pour our Chardonnays at the very end of the lineup. So we'll do all the Pinots first here in the tasting room, and then we finish with Chardonnay. And that's because it's a big flavor profile. Like it tends to kind of overpower some of the nuances of the more elegant Pinots up front. So we pour it at the end, and without a doubt, everybody will tell you their opinion about Chardonnay before they've tried it. Either they'll tell you, I either love this or I hate it, and a split about 50-50. And my favorite people to pour it for are the people that say that they hate it, because they're always shocked. Those are some of our biggest Chardonnay buyers, as they say, wait a second, I thought I hated Chardonnay. And this is not the Chardonnay I've ever had. And it's so different. And so it's become our mission to help convert people to Oregon Chardonnay. It's absolutely incredible. There's so much detail to it. I think that it's super, super age-worthy. And again, it's delicious on a hot, refreshing day because it's not a big, oily, heavy butter bomb. It has life and acid to it. And so it's refreshing on a hot day, but it's also an amazing food pairing wine. We've actually thought about doing a dinner series where we actually pair every course of the meal to a single Chardonnay, because Chardonnay can go all the way from appetizers through a dessert course like a creme brulee. It can pair with everything along that entire journey, and we're just obsessed with it.
I think you should do that. That'd be fun. Yeah, if you can convert them, then you've won them.
That is so true. Last night I was actually pouring some Chardonnay for an ABC lady. She said, "Oh, no, please no, I don't like Chardonnay." And I said, "You're going to drink it, and you can always pour it out." And she's like, "Okay, fine, I'll try it." Tries it and says, "Oh my gosh, what?" And then I explain the sort of nuances and the differences of what's kind of being created up here. And she was very, very surprised. But needless to say, Bryan and I like all Chardonnay. So this isn't a geography thing either. So we love all Chardonnay.
So it looks like this is your tasting room, and I think you refer to it as an event space as well.
Yeah, it's we do all of our tastings here by appointment. We like to do seated style tastings, where we can really spend time with the guests that come in, the friends and the family. And we do all the winemaking in the space as well. So it is a working winery. So we're sitting in the dining room here today, which is the stall number 3 and 4 of the old horse barn that have been converted with a dining room table. This is where we do all of our tastings. The winemaking really happens down at the other end. And then we do a couple events a year.
Would you say you have reached a level of success at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're much further along than we ever thought we would be. And again, starting in 2014, we had no idea what to expect. There's a lot of wineries here in the valley. In this facility here, we produce about 3,000 cases a year. That really maxes us out for the space that we're at. And so we've kind of, for this facility, at least from a production volume standpoint, we've grown to where we're going to be. And so that happened a lot more quickly than I thought. When we had our grand opening in 2016, to the public, we opened the space and we had 700 people show up for that grand opening, wow, which was like shocking. And it's really has blown us away. We've been super blessed with amazing press.
And regardless of all the work that you put in here at the winery and being terribly busy and hustling, you're still a family, and you have to go pick up the kids shortly, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. What time is it, Laura?
We've about 5 minutes before we have to go pick up the kids.
Well, just open up the Gamay and the Trousseau and Pinot, and we'll be here when you get back.
Yeah, that's perfect. That sounds good to us. Knock yourself out.
What a fun couple. Their kids are cute, too. Bryan and Laura Laing of Hazelfern Cellars, up in the hills above the town of Newburgh, not far from the luxurious Allison Hotel and Spa. See their wine, photos of the family, and their creative style at hazelfern.com. Just a short 12-minute drive to the north is Ponzi Vineyards. During the trip, I actually interviewed winemaker Luisa Ponzi before Bryan and Laura at Hazelfern. As I mentioned earlier, her parents weren't far behind Oregon winemaking pioneers David Lett of Irie Vineyards, who started growing Pinot Noir in 1965, and Dick Erath, who arrived in 1968. The Ponzis showed up that year and began planting their vineyard in 1970. They're from the Bay Area, so you'll hear Luisa touch upon that. I asked her how old she was when her parents moved up there.
So I had my first birthday in Oregon. Yes, so I was just a baby, yeah.
I guess that's a good question because I didn't know where he moved from. Where'd you guys come from?
So we came from Los Gatos. So, yeah.
Down in the Bay Area?
In the Bay Area, right. It's not, it was Los Gatos 50 years ago, so not like Los Gatos today. And he was working as an engineer for Disneyland. So he was what they called an Imagineer, and he was designing rides and nice corporate job. And it was late 60s, and had his my mom and the 3 kids, and they just really wanted to do something outside of the norm and kind of get back to the land and have something that their kids could participate in. And yeah, so it was a very much a whim.
Los Gatos isn't very close to Disneyland, though.
No, they had people. They have engineers all over the country. Yeah,
okay.
so it was. Yeah, they had.
Was he an original work at home kind of guy?
No, there was an office. Yeah, he went into the city, and he worked on like the teacups and whatever, the Small World, all those original rides. He had a hand in. So yeah, very cool.
So coming here, your dad and your mother Nancy were pioneers in the Oregon wine industry, and they sure seem to be ahead of the curve on the Pinot Noir bandwagon.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they were lovers of Burgundy, and so that was a passion that they had, and they actually traveled kind of up and down the West Coast looking for some place that they thought would be appropriate for the varietal. Went up to the Okanagan Valley, and it was a little too cool, and came back and found the Willamette Valley, and thought, oh my gosh, this is pretty ideal. And so that's where they started. There was no reference for them. There was nobody else that they knew growing grapes here. So it was really a choice that they made based on looking at the topography and the soils and the climate, and decided this might work. And they chose well.
Yeah. And it's funny, at the time, Gallo's Hardy Burgundy was popular, but oddly enough, it had no Pinot Noir in it.
Yes, exactly. And that's what people knew was Hardy Burgundy. So for a long time, when they were first producing Pinot Noir, they actually had to use that as a reference of this is something you might be familiar with. It took a long time to educate people that it was Oregon and it was Pinot Noir.
Now, I just heard today, though, your dad initially, if I'm not mistaken, planted Chardonnay, and it just didn't quite catch on, did it?
Absolutely. Chardonnay was part of the vision, right? So Pinot, of course, you plant Chardonnay, and that was kind of a given that you would have those two varietals side by side. But unfortunately, unlike the Pinot, they started with a clone that was just really not appropriate. It was perfect for California, warmer climate, and you brought it to the Willamette Valley, and it just never really quite succeeded. So it took a long time for Chardonnay to take off here. I mean, literally.
Just more recently, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say in the early 90s, we finally got the correct clones. And so things started to turn around. But at that point, most wineries had given up on the varietal. So it was a matter of kind of encouraging people to try again. So
I'm also kind of curious why your father was so into the Burgundian wines when I'm assuming Ponzi, he's Italian heritage. Right, yes. And where did he get his inspiration to leave his job and be a winemaker?
Right.
Was his father a wine drinker?
Not at all. I mean, they were wine drinkers and they were winemakers in the sense that they made wine in the garage, or the basement or whatever they were. They're very much first-generation Italian, so his parents were from Italy. So they always made wine. And I think that's, foolishly gave him some confidence that he thought he could try to make wine. And when we were down in California, even, he would make wine all the time down there. So it was very much on the home winemaking side, but they took a lot of trips to Alsace and Burgundy, and they just fell in love with those wines, and there was something that just grabbed them. And they're big risk takers. I mean, they're just obviously.
Well, it's funny you say it was a foolish, kind of endeavor, but he was kind of sly like a fox, wasn't he?
He didn't know how to farm, at all. There was no farming background at all, and so but educated and read tons of books and talked to people, and yeah,
because certainly you can learn how to be a winemaker from books, right?
Yeah. Right. after a few decades, yeah.
No, you don't really talk much about your mother on your website, but so I was going to ask you if she was much of a contributor. And then I see the pictures here, and I heard Martin behind the bar talking about her. So she was actually probably worked harder in the early days because he kept a job.
That's right. Yeah, my father had a full-time job teaching at the local community college engineering. And, she was the one out there pruning and doing most of the farm work, most of the vineyard work. We had about 10 acres planted. And she was out there. I mean, that's my, walking to the school bus. There's Mom out in the vineyard. See you tonight. And then once we had some wine in the barrel and got something bottled, she was our sales force, and it was up to her to go out and show this strange Oregon Pinot Noir to our 3 restaurants we had in Portland and try to sell the stuff. So I mean, she's instrumental on top of really moving the industry forward in a lot of ways. She's done some amazing things for the industry as far as raising money. We have an amazing auction every year to raise money for healthcare for the farm workers that she started. Oregon Pinot Camp, which is an event where we bring sommeliers and restaurateurs here once a year, about 400 people. And
that sounds like a fun camp. I would like to attend.
It's a 4-day amazing camp where we wine and dine them, but teach them about Oregon, kind of immerse them and brainwash them. But she started that as well. So she's done some amazing things for the industry, and it's true. We don't talk enough about her.
Yeah, she's hardly mentioned at all on your website.
No,
it sounds like.
Although
when you read the timeline, she's mentioned there a little more.
Yeah.
So Ponzi Vineyard was founded in 1970, and now I know you've been in a couple different locations.
Only 2. We started in maybe 3. We started in our garage. At our yes, that was our first stop, and then my father kind of converted an old shed that was on our original property into a kind of makeshift winery. And over the years, we were down at that facility for almost 40 years, and so over time that kind of built and kept adding on and putting a cellar here, and so we were down there a long time, and then finally in 2008 we found a piece of land and built a new winery, kind of that my father designed, and then we're able to move all the operations up in 2013.
So when I was here in 2007, we visited the older place, and that's where he started with the original 20 acres.
That's right. Yeah, that was the original vines and the original vineyard, and that's where I grew up. I mean, that was our home.
And, of course, that was 1970, which means next year it's the 50th anniversary.
That's right. Yes, it's our 50th next year. It's a big deal. Yes. It is a big deal. I mean, 50 years is a long time for this little young industry we have in Oregon. So,
your website says the methods, philosophies, and winemaking passion established nearly 50 years ago are still practiced today. So you're the second generation winemaker. Can you explain what those methods are?
So at this point, it's a bit of history as far as winemaking techniques that my father that had experimented with and kind of refined. I did my studies in Burgundy back in the early 90s and came back in 93, and so I'd taken a lot of what I learned in Burgundy as well as kind of very traditional techniques and going to school there, and kind of combined those 2 experiences to kind of inform the wines that I make. And so
you stepped beyond what he had learned and what he was doing.
Oh yeah, he book learned. And when I decided to come back and take over the reins, I guess, have them be passed to me, I felt I needed a little more education than just my father. And so I decided to do a postgraduate degree in Burgundy.
It's great because I spoke with Lynn Penner-Ash this morning, and she was the first, more or less, female winemaker hired in Oregon.
She was one of the first hired winemakers. Before that, it was just all family.
Yeah.
And so it was a big deal when Lynn came in and somebody had hired a professional winemaker
from Napa Valley.
Napa Valley and went to Davis. That was a big deal. Yeah.
But after graduating from college, as you mentioned, you did some postgraduate studies in Beaune, France, and you received a professional certificate of viticulture and enology, and the first American woman to do so.
Yes, yeah. It's this great school in Burgundy, and but had traditionally just been the second generation or the next generation of the domains in Burgundy. Yeah. And so when I decided to go there, it was it was very difficult to convince them to let me go. And I think finally they allowed me to go as long as I would teach English lessons. So it was a exchange of, we'll let you attend, but you need to, teach lessons. And so that was the way I got my foot in the door. And at this point, there's been many, many Americans that have gone there. So,
when you were looking around in class, were you the only woman, or were there a couple of French women there as well?
There were a few, but not many. Back in the early 90s, and working in the cellars there, it was not friendly to women. It was a difficult thing. But, and it's changed. I'm sure it's changed. I can only hope it's changed. I hope it's changed, but it is France. But it was not always comfortable.
But what an experience.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And I learned so much, and I tasted so many amazing wines that's really where my education from Burgundy, was in the ability to try those wines and really kind of inform what I wanted to make. So.
You found the bar that you were going to reach to.
Yes, especially with Chardonnay, which was, really kind of a varietal that was struggling in Oregon. And to be able to taste white Burgundies and say, wow, we should be making wines like this. We could be, and what's happening. And when I came back, that was really my passion, was to try to turn around our Chardonnay program and develop and make some really beautiful Chardonnays, which I feel like I have now.
And, well, speaking of white wines and reaching back a ways, your father was also one of the first to plant Pinot Gris here in the area.
Yes. Yeah, we when they first started, they put all these different varietals in, Alsatian varietals, mostly Pinot and Chard, but then they tried, we'll try Gewürztraminer, Sylvaner, Riesling, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, all these other varietals. Pinot Gris was the one that really kind of took off for them, and so in 78, he grafted over a lot of the vineyard to Pinot Gris, and I was one of the first commercial productions of Pinot Gris in the country.
Was that another challenging varietal for your mother to try to sell?
Yes, although there was a reference, it was a little bit easier with Pinot Grigio, but it was still, Oregon was just unknown. Yeah, so.
But your dad was certainly on the right path, because in the span of just a few years, he received some accolades from the Wine Advocate, comparing your wine to the best in Burgundy. And later, he was named one of the best winemakers. Wine Spectator added Ponzi to their list of the top 100, and Robert Parker even compared Ponzi to the great wines of Burgundy. So, high praise.
Yeah, it was high praise, especially for such a young region. And, there wasn't a lot of comparison. There weren't a lot of wineries then, but I think the writers and, the accolades came because it was such a shock and surprise to see these amazing wines coming from an unknown region. Yeah. And, it was well-deserved. Beautiful wine.
Getting back to your Italian heritage, you do grow Arnese and Dolcetto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were varietals that my father brought back from, or my parents brought back from Piedmont. Late 80s, they took a lot of trips. They go to Italy all the time, and they really loved these varietals, and they thought that they might work here, and so brought back a few cuttings and tried them. And then when I came back in '93, those vines, those vineyards were just coming into production, so I got to kind of play around, and I worked in Piedmont a little bit at a couple of facilities, and so we started producing Dolcetto and Arnese in '94 was our first vintage of those varietals, and they're just beautiful, especially the Arnese. It's a really distinct wine. I had hopes that people might plant it, but it hasn't really taken off, where I think we're still a handful of producers in the country.
Yeah. Sagacio family vineyards in Dry Creek Valley makes an Arnese. I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, Italian families.
Right. Your sister ended up becoming president and director of sales and marketing, and you are the winemaker. Now, when you were growing up and you had that vision of your mother in the vineyard when you were going off to school, were you leaning toward that as a child?
No, I don't think either of us thought we would end up in the wine business at all. I was pursuing medicine and had gotten my degree and was planning to go to medical school. And my sister, She was. It was funny because I always trailed my father around the winery and the vineyard, and she trailed my mother as she sold wine, and that was kind of the pairing. And so looking back, it's kind of like, of course, that's what we were going to do. There was no question. But at the time, I think when you grow up, and our childhood was a lot of work. That was what we did as a family, was we worked.
Yeah.
And so you hit those teenage years and you're like, there is no way I want to do this with my life. And you want to go as far as you can from it. And then, you go off to college and you go out in the world a little bit and you realize, there's something very much ingrained. And you kind of need to come back. And
it's good to go out and experience that.
You have to. I don't know how else you get that perspective.
Right.
So I think it was important that my sister went off to the East Coast and worked for a while. I went off to college. I traveled the world. And then you kind of, it dawns on you at some point. And I see that in my children now. Finally, I've got a 24-year-old that's just, his brain is just turning where he's like, winemaking looks kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
No pressure. I'm kind of waiting. But it's interesting to see it happen.
Well, I would think it'd be more enjoyable to graft grapevines than to graft, say, skin onto a human being.
No, I would not have survived in medicine. I needed a creative outlet.
We haven't mentioned your brother yet, and I saw that in 1985 he was offered the position of director of operations. Is he still involved?
Yes, no, he's not. He, my brother was with the business and worked with us for 25 years, and then he had a wild hair and decided that he wanted to move to Italy and make olive oil. So he now lives in Italy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great, and he and his wife have started a little olive oil production, and so he took a different path. My brother, he's a musician by heart, and I think for him, the business was not. He didn't have as much passion as my sister and I do, and so it was always a little bit of more obligation. He's the oldest, and I think he felt he needed to come back and help his parents, and probably should have pursued other avenues.
Yeah, that was before both your sister and you got as involved. So when you came along, then it gave him the chance to escape.
Then he was like, "Oh, okay, maybe it's okay, and I can do something else." Yeah, I think so. But he never had the love of wine that we do, and so things work out. That's great.
But he has the love of Italy.
He loves Italy, and he's always loved Italy. Yes, so now he lives there.
Well, throughout the years, your family has continued to be innovators, and especially in the practice of sustainable farming. And you guys have achieved the highest certification in the world with your sustainable viticulture. Mm-hmm.
Yes, the LIVE program, the Low Input Viticulture and Enology, which is an important part of it, has certified. Yeah, it's an international certification, and it's a sustainable certification, but it really kind of veers on the side of organic. It's very strict, and it encompasses everything, which is what I love about it. It's not just the soil and the vines, it's the people working in the vines. It's your facility and how you run your facility and the winemaking. So it kind of is a real sustainable instead of,
Even how you treat your neighbors.
How you treat your neighbors. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it goes into so many aspects, which is true sustainability. It's about, the economic sustainability of a business and doing the right thing. So and
how we all should live. Make the world a much better place if we all had that in mind.
If we apply that to our whole lives, that would be great.
Well, tell us about this fairly new, stunning, state-of-the-art gravity flow winery you have that your father designed, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So when so the first 40 years of the winery, about 40 years, we were in a garage and lots of rooms and kind of trying to make it all work. And we learned through that the importance of gravity, importance of gentle handling for Pinot Noir. And so when we had the opportunity to purchase this hillside that we were offered, we weren't really looking, but there was a local farmer that was like, we're going to sell if you guys want to look. And it was like the perfect hillside. And my father had been kind of dreaming of this building for I don't know how long, but when we finally purchased the land, he had drawn the blueprints, got them to the county within like a month of this beautiful, gravity flow 4-level winery that you could really, focus on the winemaking as opposed to the logistics of a building, which is what we were doing in the past. So it's been a wonderful thing. So I, feel very lucky that I, was able to work in this facility and that my father designed it. So together we were able to really put together something
That's cool.
Feel is ideal for these varietals.
I'm surprised it doesn't have a Disney flair to it.
It does a little. I mean, there's a lot in there. There's a lot of
in the mechanics.
There's a lot of kind of creative little things he did that had the construction people scratching their heads.
Nice.
Yeah, he's an engineer by heart, but he's also an artist in a way. So he likes the aesthetics of things as well, which is great.
Well, Luisa, I could talk to you for hours about all your family has accomplished, and so I'm going to wrap this up now, but I suggest to my listeners to look up PonziVineyards.com and read about all the other contributions you have made to the industry here.
Yeah, I mean, 50 years is a long time, and we've done a lot in those 50 years. We created an industry, so it's been a wonderful journey for our whole family, and so yes.
Well, congratulations. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
What a fun interview. Luisa Ponzi of Ponzi Vineyards in Oregon's Willamette Valley. I realize it may be quite a while before you can visit, but I hope I have at least inspired the consideration of visiting the wineries of Oregon when the conditions provide that opportunity. They make fantastic wine, and the smaller towns are quite appealing. And there are a lot of good restaurants up there as well. Today's show was researched, written, and produced by me. Music is from FirstCom. Find past interviews at onthewineroad.com. I'm on Instagram and occasionally on Twitter at JDWineRoad and Facebook as On the Wine Road. When you have a moment, please rate this podcast on iTunes. Thank you. I wish you continued health and peace of mind during this crazy COVID period. I'm Jeff Davis, and I hope you can join me again next time on the Wine Road.